I'm Dr. Nancy Moonstar, host of A Man's Guide to Intimacy, Series 3, Bold Love with Passion. And I am welcoming a beautiful Neo-Tantra specialist, helps relationships recover, grow, heal, expand. She is a counselor, an intimacy coach, and sexual healer, certified tantric educator, Hakomi graduate, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and 25-year Tantra practitioner. We're going to learn about the art of conscious intimacy and masculine presence.
Yes.
Yes, she is all about healing ourselves, healing yourself, and facing the truth, going deep into the true self and communication with self-love. We welcome, yes, Lindy James.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
I'm looking forward to this.
well, I'm delighted and I'm excited, and I love this title of presence and deepening presence. And, that's the cornerstone really of intimacy for a man to learn about. Can you just open with some of that and what your thoughts are with that?
Yeah, there's a quality of presence that we develop when we can become more still in ourselves. So presence is more than mind, it's in the whole body. And so when a man is very present, it so naturally brings out the feminine. So like I would say the divine masculine, just being in his body and present and grounded, then my whole feminine just goes, ah, I relax.
Nice. So I'm going to back us up. Let's say somebody's hearing this for the first time, or they're trying to figure out a little more concretely, well, what do you mean by presence? And my mind was even wondering if you might give a little example. Here's not present, and here's present.
Oh, very good. Yes. When I'm around so many people that know just these words, and I realize, yeah, we need to define them a little more. And presence is when you step out of thinking and just really noticing your environment. And if you're with a woman, noticing how maybe she feels, noticing how she looks, and maybe asking her questions and truly listening, because oftentimes when we're seeing or hearing something, it triggers a thought and then an idea and then a fix it. And really what we want is just feeling you. And when a man can breathe into his own body, and grounding is like, I think of it like electricity. So when you put the electricity in a house, there's a grounding wire that keeps the electricity. I don't know exactly what it does, but it's necessary. And so as energetic beings, as our bodies are alive, when we think about the earth and think about as if we had a grounding cord, there's a steadiness that happens. And it's really useful when we're upset, when we're engaged, and when we're excited. Even before this interview, I'm just like, connect with the earth and feel my center in a way. And so when we come from that sense of groundedness, there's a feeling of, I can feel my heart, I can feel my belly, I can even feel down into my sits bones.
Nice. So this grounding cord sort of sense and into the earth
Right.
and the environment, not just up in the head or thoughts. And so tell us a little bit about what is Neo Tantra?
Neo-Tantra, Tantra itself comes from many traditions. The Tantra around sexuality is basically a Hindu practice. It comes from the Hindu religion. And in my mind, it's in what I've been taught is that there's some cultures that marriages are arranged. And then there's a teaching like how to create love. And so Neo is the same as new or Western Tantra, to just be respectful of all the other Tantras that are Buddhists and Hindu, that it's Westernized because we are a different mind. We don't meditate for hours in a day, or we don't go live in a cave for a year, those sort of things. So it's just adjusted a little bit for us. And I wrote my own little notes, Neo Tantra is like the union of sex and meditation and presence, and then being really in your heart, because we have so much conditioning around sex. And when we feel that sexual energy, then there's a place to go and a goal. And Tantra really teaches us that let go of goal and just really feel our aliveness in our sexuality. And so we take that physical and combine it with spiritual in a certain way. It's not so much a religion, but a beautiful experience.
So if someone were to ask, if a man were to ask, well, what exactly is Tantra? I'm hearing you say that it's the union of sex and meditation. Is there any other sort of easy way for him to get a definition?
Yeah, so it's slowing down. You don't have to sit in silence and meditation for hours, but really to slow down and be in the awareness field. And I know I use a lot of like lingo from my era, but that being in the awareness field means like I'm aware of my breath. I'm aware of, if you take your hands and rub them together, you can create a little heat in your hands. And then your mind is maybe aware in your hands as you touch. And learning to touch, like, how often do we just hold our partner's face and look into their eyes like they are the most precious thing? Because we forget how precious we are with this world of goals and busyness and producing. Like, to stop all that and just be with your partner and let love come through your eyes, through your touch, through your words.
Yeah, you were saying this conditioning around sex, and it's like you're bringing us into almost the counter conditioning of sex. That
Exactly, yeah.
it's different because my impression is men and women, sexuality is sort of a ramping up of energy, and you're really kind of doing the opposite. Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that there isn't some ramping as part of it. And having a goal and having an orgasm isn't wonderful. It is. But there's so much more when we slow down. And I look at it as our family, our culture, the collective. In a way, we are all conditioned in a certain way. If I'm turned on, I have to do something. If my partner's turned on, I can't stop. So we learn those things, bringing in the term mindfulness, awareness of what I think as a habit. I have to be charming. I have to be something this other person wants. So that's the conditioning. And around sexuality, to touch more of the body as opposed to the primary zones, to open the body and have us feel like a union. I get excited and all the words come at once. But one of the things that example I use a lot is, if you have two guitars and you pluck the string of one, the other one resonates, will make sound. So we can have our bodies attuned with each other so that we feel one another on a whole nother level. And Tantra gives us many simple little exercises to go that way.
And so what are some of these exercises that you love and that you think are great for getting this together?
Well, part of, like, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship and you want to spark it a little bit. Sometimes we come home from the end of a busy day, maybe there's kids, maybe we're older and we don't feel that much sexuality, or we're tired. And if you make an agreement to have a 10-minute connect before dinner or before you get up and go to work, and a 10-minute connect could be just laying and spooning together and finding one breath.
Mm.
In fact, it's in my gift video. So just a couple of those kind of practices, or just sitting and being present with one another and saying, how was your day?
Mm.
And truly listening and not interrupting, and just like, oh, wow, that might have been a tough day, or that might have been exciting. When we feel truly listened to, again, we become more attuned with each other.
Mm.
And just say 10 minutes. And even if you feel a spark of sexuality in that 10 minutes, our agreement is we're just going to come back to it. We're going to then go make dinner. Because connecting often is like, if we're going to connect like this, then we have to have sex. And so if I don't feel like having sex, then I don't do any connection. So really taking that as a precursor to lovemaking at some other time.
So my impression is that Tantra techniques like you're talking about are so great for a guy to be aware of, because it's really a transition for him. It's not like you're both going to show up at the exact same moment and then move into something easily. And talk about how it helps with him to be aware of that so he can transition her into this space.
Oh. So say, for instance, with the breathing practice, if he is the one in behind and guiding, and his arm is kind of around her, so he can put a hand on a heart, and his other arm's around the top, and he can put his hand on her belly, or if she's willing, just to cup her yoni. And yoni is the Sanskrit word for vagina, and it translates as sacred space.
Mm.
Isn't that cool? I mean, that just changed everything for me.
Yes, yeah, and you mentioned a very nice gesture of cupping her our special place. And if you don't mind even going into that just a little bit for a guy, if you're helping him understand how to do that.
Oh, so I get excited because I love that personally, because we don't have to feel like something's going to happen. Something has to happen if we touch anything sexual, particularly the breast or the yoni, that if we touch it, then it has to lead to sex. But if we just cup it, and we can imagine the love we feel for this partner moving down the arm and into our cupped hand, and we're holding their heart, we create a circuit. I love circuits. And so we're just putting love in there. And so many of us growing up, our lack of sexual education and making it up, a lot of times, including my case, my yoni was numb and she didn't want to play. And so this kind of gesture really helped her to relax. I'm not disassociating, but I do talk about my yoni as her. And once we connect the neural pathways back down into the body, then we can start to feel more. So the man's presence and we ask, may I? Because oftentimes when we were younger, learning about sex, we weren't asked. And that changes everything.
Nice. Wow. So his transitioning into some of these, holding her a certain way, breathing, just his mindset, and what else would you sort of give to a man who's listening now to just coach him a little bit more into this space so he gets it at even another level?
So if you have this beloved in front of you and you're laying together, and to think into your own body. So I often say inviting the thinking mind to take on the job of awareness, of witness. And you can notice her breath. You can notice, oftentimes we'll cry when a man holds us this way. Oftentimes I will. In fact, sometimes when I feel agitated, I will ask my man. Sometimes I'll even ask a friend, just be in your masculine and hold me. And it releases natural tears. There's no need to fix it or do anything. And just be like, I'm right here. Men are so conditioned to be the ones that fix something, that take care, that have to do something. And so learning to not do and just be is a whole different learning.
Mm-hmm.
He can feel into his heart and notice, what does love feel like? And that's a learning. So in the beginning, learning to notice what love feels like, we just put our hand on our heart area, and your chest feels your hand and your hand feels your chest. So in a way, we're retraining the mind to listen. And when your heart, the front of your heart is against the back of her heart, and then your hand is over that, you've kind of sandwiched her heart in your bubble of affection. And these are the kind of ways that you can just be still in yourself and do that. You'll be so surprised how well it's received.
Say that again, that position, because that sounds wonderful. If you just say it once again.
So the front of your heart is against the back of her heart. And I might even say, feel my heart against your heart. Mm. And then your hand on the front of her heart is there, so that her heart is sandwiched between your heart and then even your love coming through your hand over her heart, or your hand cupping her yoni. It's important that you don't start rubbing and circling and trying to do something to excite her yoni. If she gets excited, just stay still. And if you get excited, just stay still. Because the feeling of the lingam, which is the Sanskrit word for penis, is, the translation is wand of light. So you can express your love through your wand against her sacrum and her cupping of her yoni. And so as soon as we feel that sexual charge, but to do very little with it, but breathe. You can breathe sexual energy into your heart. You can use your intention to move that sexual energy, and that's so delicious.
Yeah, I love what you're explaining here. Yeah. And it's part of the new conditioning rather than this old conditioning, for a man to come in and just be, and to move through these movements and these holdings, and maybe bring us along even further. This is so luscious, so beautiful.
So we have, on a little science thing about the brain, we have these neural pathways. My teacher would call the back of the head the yoni of the mind, or in the Taoist practices, they call it the jade pillow. And the pathways down into the body get disrupted or broken. So in my case, I didn't have much feeling in my yoni. For men, sometimes there's shame or this need to perform or have strong erections. And we begin to retrain the mind to let go of those beliefs and just really love ourselves the way we are. So habitual patterns are the ones we watch for. Like, am I saying this or doing this out of habit? So like the example of, I feel a little bit of arousal, my habit is to then do something. But what if I change that to, I feel a little bit of arousal and I just breathe with it and open myself to that sense of breathing it through the body? And that takes a practice. And that's why I'm planting seeds right now, but it's also really helpful to have a coach to help you breathe and find it and feel it. A lot of times the men will say to me, the women too sometimes, like, I don't feel anything, because that feeling is cut off. We don't look like, even as I'm talking about doing this, I'm feeling it and going, oh yeah, that's really good. We learn to feel it, but it takes time and patience.
Mm. And thank you for being such a clear example, sharing your own experience in this moment and what it's, because men need to know what it's like for a woman. So how did you get into this? What drew you into Neo Tantra?
Um, God, many, many years ago, like 30 years ago or a little more, a friend of mine invited about 20 of us in our community to my first Tantra weekend. And I was married at the time, and it was Friday evening, all day Saturday, Saturday night practice, and all day Sunday. And I was terrified. If I didn't trust my friend. And I often find that when people hear Tantra, they think orgies, which is what I thought. And yes, there are Tantra teachers that do talk more about orgasm and sex and that part of Tantra, but really my teacher would say, you know, beautiful orgasms is a signpost along the way, but really opening to everything else. And in that Tantra training, my husband joined me in all the practices. And Saturday night, we created the sacred temple space where you go to the store and you buy cheese and wine and grapes and create music and flowers and rose petals in the bath. And that whole sacredness was completely new to me. The little petals, you know, my teacher would teach the guys separately from the women. And then he did a ritual with me we call sacred spot massage. This is basically a massage of the yoni, of the whole body, and particularly the G spot. And I got at that moment that this kind of behavior was going to heal me, was going to really change my life. And over time it did. And I'm 62 now, and I have more aliveness in my sexuality than when I was in my 20s and 30s because of these practices. And so it became my passion. And I happen to be a good, like, teaching. I've always taught. I used to teach horseback riding. And then I studied Hakomi, which is a very body-centered form of psychotherapy. And that combination just was like, this is what I do.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so then what drew you to focus on coaching men in intimacy?
Well, I realized that this is kind of a big subject, but I'll try not to take too long. I realized that in the 60s, the men became more in touch with their feminine and more flowy, and the women became more in their touch with their masculine and took charge, which is wonderful because we need both our masculine and feminine. And then as we went forward, there was this rift between the masculine and feminine that I became more and more aware of, where the feminine were like, where's the male? Where's that strong masculine male? And simultaneously emasculating them, you know, and not being kind, shaming them in lots of ways. And then the women became a little more afraid of being in their feminine. And so I started by this idea of helping men become more true to themselves. So they weren't always trying to please a woman outside of their truth, outside of who they really are, so that they were not going into relationships that didn't really suit them. And so helping a man become real instead of just nice. You know, what's your real beingness? And it was so fun to take men out and, It could be in a cafe, it could be at the beach or in a meadow, and help them just be with me as a masculine. It was just a hoot every time.
Wow. So let's move a little bit into talking about women. And as you're painting a picture to men about women hesitating or being slightly reticent to really step into their feminine, what does that look like? And what exactly would you define their feminine as?
The feminine principle is more flowing, more creative, more artsy in a way. You know, it doesn't mean that they've lost their masculine. I was just talking with a friend of mine who's like very guy, you know, just very manly. And yet in his home, he always has flowers and beauty, and he cooks, and he doesn't just cook something, he arranges it on the plate, you know, and makes it beautiful. And so that was an example of a nice mix of the masculine and the feminine. And I remember in myself, I grew up on a horse ranch. I could drive a tractor, you know, I could train horses.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little afraid of my feminine side, and to surrender and to trust the masculine, whether it's my inner masculine or a male, that I would be held. And once I learned, you know, how to recognize that in a man, sometimes I would even go up to, like at dance, we have a thing called dance church, and I would go up to a very male and say, could you do me a favor and just squeeze me for a second?
No.
And he'd be like, well, of course.
Nice. So build a little bit more on the feminine now. So women, and you gave a great example for yourself, and I heard the word trust. So what would you have a man understand that a woman needs to surrender or needs to feel that she can move into being feminine, and maybe talk a little bit more about?
That's a good question. Sometimes I want to fight against it, you know, and so whatever the woman does, whether she is grumpy with you or pushy with you, or like, this is not what I wanted, that that it doesn't push you off your center. David Data really says it well. Like, she comes into the room and she says, I'm tired of you watching football and I want your attention. And David Data would say, you turn to her and say, I'm watching football. This is important to me. I'll be done in an hour. Put your nice dress on and we're going out to dinner. So he didn't fumble and try to make excuses. He was just like solid. And that can be really scary for a man. But I love it. And I would rather not like what you said, but I would trust you more if you're being honest. So there might be a moment where I'm not happy, like, I don't like you right now. and then, you know, if you actually show up for that in an hour, in 2 hours, if you really show up for it, that's what he would say. Is I really want a man to then honor what he says. That's what creates trust. Not to say I'm going to be there at 5 and show up at 6. That takes trust away. I mean, sometimes you can't help it, but to really stand by your word, to really show up when you say you're going to show up, and not to let me and my feminine moods push you around. Doesn't mean you have to be mean, but just really still stay in here with yourself, into your heart and into your body. And that grounding cord, because women can go big energy, stick that grounding cord in the earth.
Nice. You talk about something very important, because men are wired to please their woman, their partner. And it's going to be hard for him at times to hold the line, stay grounded, do what you're doing, and then give her a message. You haven't abandoned her. You will be free at this time, rather than I can't attend to you now, or a negative statement, but it's a positive of when I will be available.
Yeah.
And so I'm covering a couple of points here. Would you address him standing firmly in what he's about and not being thrown off? And also saying things that will give her a place to meet with him, a space, a knowing, and a sort of, I was going to say training, but it's a building a trust.
Right. Um, so just like now, like I have a lot of things to say and I just take a breath. Deep breath. It's good for just about everything. And when we're learning, we need to be gentle with ourselves. So I'm a recovering good girl, nice girl, pleaser. And so when I started learning to say no, it was terrifying. And then learning to say no with love really helps. So at first, it's like, no. And then over time, it's like, I love that you want to spend time with me and I am available then. So then it's kinder. So there's a period where it'll be a little shaky and fumbly, and just let yourself be fumbly and bumbly. You might even say to your partner, if you are married, this is what I'm learning right now. I once said to my partner, I'm learning about anger right now, and I might be messy. So just so you know, and I'm happy to clean it up when I make a mistake.
Mm.
So being patient with yourself. And I have something I want to read that just goes with this. When I dare to be powerful and use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. So however our mothers taught you, your mothers taught you, however, you've been hurt in the past, that fear comes up. And our culture has taught us to do everything to not be uncomfortable. That uncomfortable is our edge for learning. So that strength that gets built when we can be uncomfortable and still say no will go so long.
Mm.
Wow. And to have a woman be upset or mad, and you're just staying in your loving place and not being defended. In fact, that's a really beautiful one. When I'll go to say to my partner, I'm really mad at you. And he says, great, tell me about it. And that's what I love about him. He's not perfect. He's got all kind of issues himself, but in relating to me, he's just listens. He doesn't need to fix me. And if I say, yeah, I'm mad because you blah, 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 and he'll say, yeah, I think you're right. I'm shocked. It just totally thrills me. There's nothing to fight against. And let's talk about a way we can make this work in the future. Wow, that built so much trust in me. And even if he's got stuff going on, I still trust him because I know how he relates to me.
So this phenomena of her being the good girl and being rather addicted to it, and it makes it almost impossible for her to be angry in a clean fashion. Is that so? And help guys understand that, because it shows up, and maybe you can help them understand this is what it looks like, or you might notice this, or
right, because if you block your anger, then you becomes numb until it gets so big. Like for me in the old days, my anger was in my stomach. I had a stomach ache, and I thought, oh, I'm one of these people that's never angry. And if I'm angry and I'm not in my body, then there'll just be this outward surly kind of short, and nothing you do is right. It's just not going to serve me. And if you just grab me up in your arms and squeeze me and hold me, and don't ask why, don't ask how, and just say, I love you. I'm here. Oftentimes underneath anger is tears. And all I need is to be squeezed, or often a woman, and not all women are used to this. So, you have to kind of gauge it. But if you're like, how can I please you? How can I make you feel better? That's not, again, being solid in yourself. That's trying to please them in a way like the pleaser. And often you'll get batted away.
Yeah, so he can't fix her all the time. There has to be this ability on his part to stay present. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about it, because this is very powerful for him, because all women are moody or can be bratty. And, he's got a chance now to grow himself and incorporate these ideas to a new level. And I guess I really wanted him to understand, when he sees this curtness, this sharpness, this edgy, that this is not a place for him to, as you, it was almost like you were doing like a begging or a puppying towards her.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So just
Right.
any thoughts about that that you want to add in here, I think could be helpful.
First of all, don't take anything she says personal, because at that moment you might represent all men, and especially any man that's hurt her.
Mm.
You are it. And you might just hold her and say, what do you need right now? And she may not know what she needs, but rather than trying to fix whatever it is, can I chop those carrots for you? Or let's just sit down and let me hold you for 3 minutes. Something simple, not complicated, because when we're in our emotions, we're not in our intellect. There's two sides of the brain, and emotion and intellect. What doesn't make sense, talking sense into emotions is like oil and water just doesn't mix. So when anyone is emotional, it's not true. I didn't say that or do that. It doesn't help her. It's like, oh, I see you're feeling angry or tender, or sometimes better not to even name it. Just say, I see you're feeling something. Something's up. How can I be with you? And if you really can be with her. So if you're stirred up, if you're feeling emotional, then you might say something like, I just need a minute. I'll be back in 10. Go outside, fiddle with the garden, do something with your car or whatever, and really find your ground and then come back.
Nice.
And it's nice when a woman, like, I've learned to ask. So before we started today, I asked a dear friend of mine, he's like my brother. And I said, I'm a little nervous. Could you come help me with the lighting and just hold me for 5 minutes? And he was like, men are so happy to be given what we need. It's like, that was clear. And he said, well, I'm busy and I'm doing this and this. I can come then. And it was clear. And I was like, okay. And so he just was here for 15 minutes, and it just helped soften everything. It just really, I felt supported. And it's not just supported by this one person, but I felt supported by the masculine.
Mm.
And that helped me just even more relax into myself.
That's a very simple but profound. So, what could a man do to support her in her feminine if she's at a very basic beginner stage? Because you've given him a great understanding here, and he's going to want clear messages. And what would he say to her to sort of start her in the direction that could help him move into this helpful guy, and help her be able to say, you're saying what you want. I'm a woman asking for what I want, and it's not necessarily a concrete thing.
Right. Um, right. And so my friend has been around my teaching for a long time. So he knows that I'm not asking him to rescue me, fix me, or whatever. And it is, I think, I think it's good to read books to, like, I know David Data isn't always the best for men. He can be arrogant and lots of things, but his basic premise is really helpful. And if I'm with a partner, if I were a man and I was partnered, then I would say, so love, can we talk for a minute? I really want to learn what you want. And I need it to be very simple. So can we have a conversation about that? And if you're willing with me to practice simple, so if she says, I want a man that's going to do, and then gives the whole book, like, let's bring it down to simplicity. I want a man that's going to show up when he says he's going to show up. Or negotiate, like, oh, something does come up. Sweetie, I had a flat tire, or my friend needs my support. Can I come in an hour instead of now? Can we learn this together? Because I really want to support you. Mm-hmm. And just those words, I really want to be with you. Or, if once you get to understand the word presence, I really want to be present for you. Mm-hmm. I'm learning that. And that vulnerability is so precious to us. It's like when we're needy, if we say, I feel needy, that's really much more acceptable than acting out neediness, because you're going to get the opposite. You're going to get like, get off of me. But if you just say, I'm feeling needy, or I'm feeling scared, or I'm feeling something, we're feeling creatures. Like, oh, that'll just endear you to our hearts, that realness.
That's a great point. Wonderful points. Yeah. So you're very open, and I wondered if you just tell us a little bit about what a typical session looks like working with a Neo Tantra coach and intimacy.
Well, the beginning, I always start with the practice of using our breath and a mindfulness practice, so that I start teaching the men and women too how to breathe their awareness into their body. And that's a practice. So there's steps to doing that. Like I showed, hand on your heart, and eventually you feel into your heart. Or an easy one is like when our heart's broken, there's a physical feeling of hurt. Or when we need to cry, or we're really angry, there's a physical feeling in the throat. In all of the body, there's feel, like the gut feeling we talk about, or intuition feeling that's considered part of the third eye. So I begin by teaching that. And then we'll have talked a little bit about what you're wanting to work on, and then we'll go from there. So once I can say, we'll do an activity, or I'll say something, and what is it you notice? And at a certain point, that learning to notice inside yourself, also then you can notice the other. Mm-hmm. It's like, I can feel when you drop into your heart. Something happens in my heart. And I can say, is this mine or is this theirs? And it's like, oh, it's theirs. It's that resonance. Mm-hmm. And when I started this, my first client was a young man of 21. It was so fun to catch him young. And he says, he really liked to have a woman that could be playful. And we ended up wrestling on the beach, getting sand everywhere. And he had never had the experience. So for me, experiential is important. He had never had the experience of a feminine, of a woman playing like that. Mm. And so I use myself as a response. So how my feminine responds, then I share that with you. And I might say, let's do a take two and have you say that again. Ah, now she opens. So you get to play with me as a sounding board, as a real feminine, which I am, and learn that way. And I'm gentle and I'm kind. So that is very healing for the masculine.
So the word witness popped in when you were sort of saying, notice what you're noticing. Can you explain more on the witness aspect that you briefly mentioned earlier?
Right. So it's just one of the words that the mind can understand. So I'm witnessing myself, for example, as I turn my attention inward, I feel inside like a kind of excitement, like a little movement inside my body. And I can interpret that as fear or excitement. As I hear my partner say, oh, let me hear about what you're angry about. I can actually witness or feel my heart go, oh, I don't have to fight. And so we turn our attention inward. There's a witnessing, like a looking at what we feel, what we notice. And then once we learn to do that for ourselves, then we can witness, through our eyes, like the body language. I can tell right away when someone's holding their breath. I had one client, a female, and she would, whenever she wanted to cry, she would pinch her lips and they would quiver. And so I'm witnessing like she's put a lid on her emotions, and I invited her to howl. and that just like moved it right out. But my ideas come from a listening. I don't like, okay, the textbook says we should do this now. It just comes organically. And so that organic wisdom, I would say, that's what I'm helping all of my students to learn, so that when we play with one another, so I'll let my real feelings be seen and help him see them and feel them and be present. Sometimes my clients give me beautiful tears, beautiful joy. I had one man who said, he's super shy. And he said, I don't know how to make small talk. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, don't. I said, just look at me and see what catches your attention. And he goes, well, I like those earrings. And I said, what about their earrings? They're just so creative and beautiful. And I was like, oh, I love that. Mm-hmm. So how to, so that's a big learning. Like, we don't need to make small talk. It's like we can make real talk.
So move this into a little more touchy-feely, a little more sensual, sexual area. What do you encourage a man to do next to move into that area for his beloved and himself?
Well, so I would always start with those little connects. If you can, before you get up out of bed, just spoon with each other and breathe with each other. And then if you have a busy day, then, there's a boundary. There's like, let's have a 10-minute connect. And even if we have a spark of sexual feelings, that's going to kind of tickle you all day with anticipation. Mm-hmm. And when you get home, again, pausing and just doing that. And when a man can feel his own pleasure, I remember teaching a man with a partner who didn't want to be very sexual with him. And I said, so be sexual with yourself, just pleasure yourself. And then don't go all the way to orgasm, but just feel that spark of pleasure in yourself. And it creates, for men and women, a kind of radiance that makes you actually attractive. Mm-hmm. So rather than, I need to have sex, once a week, twice a week, or whatever, I am a radiant being, and she's going to be attracted to that. And I think that's a huge distinction that, one time my husband said to me when I was very young, honey, I'm a man and I have my needs. I started wearing turtlenecks, like clothes that were lumpy. And I never let him see me naked. It wasn't a good invitation for me. And had he said, honey, I'd love to just hold you and be with you, that would have started to break that up for me. But he didn't understand. Even after that whole Tantra training, he didn't understand. And I didn't have the skills I have now. If I had known then what I know now, it would have been different. And so building your own energy, the Taoists would call it qi, building your own sexual energy, and then making these beautiful little connects. I teach my students to have Tantra dates. And so once or twice a week, one receives, the other gives. And it could be simple, like the many little Tantra exercises, sitting. There's one we call Yab Yum, where she sits in his lap and her feet are around his back. And, you need to work with chairs or pillows, depending on your flexibility. And you can do it with clothes or naked, and just breathing and feeling the skin. For me, I don't have that hormone anymore that says, I want to have sex, or I don't feel horny, is the old world used word. But I know that I want intimacy. And I know that even if neither one of us feel like it, if we put our skin together naked and just breathe and move, some spark happens every time. My old mind says, it's not going to happen this time. I'm afraid it's not going to happen this time. And it always does, because we have these ingredients that we've really connected with one another. It just brings tears to my eyes, just remembering that, because I thought something was wrong with me. And really what it was is we didn't know how to approach each other in my past relationships. And there's nothing wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong with any of you. We're just cultivating our passion and our excitement. And so there might be a date that we just do that breathing together. There might be a Tantra date where I'm just going to touch your body with my hands and my heart, or I'm going to lay on you, and keep it really simple. And then afterwards you stop. And then if you decide you want to make love, then you can go farther into it. But really leaving out agenda, leaving out that goal of, I have to have an orgasm, she has to have an orgasm. And there's many practices for men to learn to, especially as they get older, it's better not to ejaculate. There's lots of practice about how to orgasm, where you can feel all this pleasure and you bring it up into your body, your vitality, and you can have that sense of a strong pleasure and erection, and not to get what we call blue balls, where the energy is too much in the genitals and the testicles, but breathing it in. Excellent practices to learn, so that you can just exchange energy and then decide if you want to have an orgasm, if the man wants to ejaculate. In Tantra, the men do it less and less the older they get, because it is such a strong life force and so much nutrients in that semen. It's better not to send it away.
So I'm hearing a lot about being conscious, being present, and I'm wanting even maybe, how does he bring even greater presence before penetration? And you're giving a lot of clues here that if you could drop the goal setting, but let's say it's consensual, or it seems, how would he know that she's ready? How would he be holding the right mindset and presence to handle penetration at the highest level?
Wow, that's a big one. Um, well, first I would say, ask your guy that your other interviewers that question, because I don't know how my man knows, but I know how I feel. And there's a quality of openness, and it's not just that the yoni is wet, but it is that the yoni is wet. The yoni has, because the inside of the yoni is erectile tissue, just like the lingam. And when that's open and she's wet and her whole being is open, and you might just start at the entrance of her yoni and just let your heart be right through your lingam into the entrance of her yoni, and she might show you by pulling you in. I know for myself, when I was younger, and maybe even as late as 10 years ago, at that point, if my yoni wasn't completely lubricated, it would be really uncomfortable. I also know that I can be fully turned on, and then when the focus goes into the yoni, some of the feeling goes away. So we have to be willing to stop or hold still, or even have what we call in Tantra a soft on, so that the penis may become soft because we're not getting enough friction, or something else comes up in the man, which happens when they get older. There's so much love and presence and good sensation that can happen with the wand, even without being really erect. And you can paint around her yoni. So I think the main thing about penetration is going slow, periods of movement, and periods of stillness, and really looking in her eyes. It's surprising how much people don't look in each other's eyes. And that is sometimes more intimate than intercourse. So that practice of feeling inside. So if I tune into my whole body and even down into my yoni, and then I just look out. I'm not looking out, but just looking out and being right there with my partner. And I still sometimes find it like I'm being really seen. I can get squirmy. It takes a while to practice this. So when you're doing it, if you feel your mind getting busy, just close your eyes, tune in, and then open again and look. And that'll just really add to the opening and helping her.
So that was beautiful, by the way. I heard you talk about opening and really what that is like for a woman. And so the last few words you were saying, lost it.
Like eye gazing and intimacy.
Oh yes, and you said she may not be, she may actually stop responding at a certain triggers or certain cues. Just a little mention of that, if you would.
Right. So my conditioning was that once penetration happened, there was no stopping. That was wrong, bad, or something.
Mhm.
And even if my yoni was no longer feeling anything. And I've learned since then, and we can teach our woman to say this, can we stop for a little bit? I would say my heart's afraid. Because if I didn't have any sensation in my yoni, then I turn my awareness to my heart, I could feel that tightness. And he would say, of course. And then I would cry, and then I would laugh, and then we'd go back to intercourse. So the yoni is a mysterious place, as you might already know. And our whole history of our sexuality is inside that beautiful cave. And so there's maybe a lot of pleasure, and then you hit a place of pain and wounding, and then you hit a place of numbness. And just to know that your love going into that yoni is going to clear that, is going to bring those things up. It brings me tears just saying that. It just brings those things up. to be healed and loved. And most of our wounding, sorry,
Oh,
most of our wounding happens in a place of aloneness and shame and unconsciousness. So when you bring that divine masculine into those places, it just heals us. You don't need to rescue or change or anything. So a lot of times when women are standoffish, you can bet, I think all of us on one level or another, from just inappropriate behavior to full-on rape. And this is where the divine masculine comes in and helps not just me healing, but it helps the collective in a lot of ways.
yeah, you just really hit on a very beautiful point. Thank you so much. And it's one of the compelling reasons I'm doing the work I'm doing, because men have this tremendous power to heal. And you painted a lovely, beautiful picture that he doesn't have to do a special acrobatic. It's really about him being present. It's about him being for her, with her now. And I've got chills just, as you bring this up. So thank you. Yes.
And the other piece that comes into my mind is that a lot of men who are more feminine have had either fathers or culture where men have been the abusers. And so they're afraid to be masculine. They're afraid to be that powerful masculine being. And to really know there's a separateness. Yes, men have been powerful masculine beings and abused that power. And we're not calling that in. We're calling in that divine masculine who can be strong, who can set boundaries, who can hold us. And that's such a different place. And that's where men come to me for that healing, because we are calling in that divine masculine. Or I have couples groups, or I have, beginner tantra trainings, so that we can take our time and learn these things together.
Mm. Wow.
It really got me there.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful. So just to repeat, this divine masculine can be strong. He can hold a woman, and there was something else you added to that. That
Be in his power, in his strength, in service of his brothers and his woman. Because it's not the same as that negative, dark, from the 50s and before, where the masculine was the ruler and dinner had to be done when he got home and women were second class. That's why I started this all together, is like there's a healing that's needed from those days, and then from the change, and now coming back into balance.
Nicely put. Wow,
Yeah.
that's great beginning of our closing here. And is there anything else that you would part with or want to add to the conversation before we do close?
Well, and even in speaking to men who don't have their long-term partner yet and are dating, when you learn this, it's women will fall in love with you. So there's a ethics around this. Powerful masculine. It's not about getting the woman to fall in love with you. It's about finding the woman that, of course, falls in love with you, but is the right match. So we want this. And women that are single want this really bad. And so just know that you need to choose that it's the right person for you, because she'll give everything when she feels that safety. Some women will give themselves away without care and then be hurt. And I see that in my classes, and I give the tantra warning, the ethics of it, because when you have several people to practice with until you're ready to go out and meet your partner, to really be clear that this is not a tool for getting someone to fall in love with you that isn't your right partner, but it is a gift to the feminine, a beautiful gift. And we are longing and waiting for that. If we're scared.
What was the last phrase?
Even if we're a little scared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So do you have a free gift for our audience?
Yes, and I will be uploading that to you in the next couple of days. It is a video, and in that video, I talk a little bit more about the masculine. I talk a little bit more about what we've talked about today, and then I guide, I think, at least 3 different practices that are helpful for embodiment in that shifting to presence.
Nice. Lindy, thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity and your openness, your open heart, your open presence, and showing us that. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
you're welcome. My pleasure. It's really fun to talk with you and to share this out in the world.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Bye-bye.